Some people may be kind of tied up with sports tonight.
Yeah, Michael is watching the Texans game.
Well, I'm glad somebody's keeping track of that. I'll find out what's going on later. So, let me pull up, but you've got the link to the handout, but let's actually show it to everyone. Okay. So now, share screen, texts, and here they are, presto. Okay. So, yeah, this week, even though Nitzavim is a really short sedra, I mean, this week it's a double sedra, Nitzavim-Vayeilech, but Nitzavim itself is just packed with terrific material, especially for this time of year, leading up to Rosh Hashanah. Nitzavim is normally the last Torah reading before Rosh Hashanah. So it's sometimes referred to as Parshat HaTeshuvah, the portion that deals with repentance. And so here is why. And you return to the Lord your God, and you and your children heed his command with all your heart and soul, just as I enjoin upon you this day. And God will return your captivity and have mercy on you, will gather you from all the nations where the Lord your God is dispersed. I mean, a lot of that just sounds like the rabbi on Rosh Hashanah, right? So this is Moses on the eve of their departure for the land. He says, tshuva, that's really, really important, right? If things go wrong, maybe it's because you did something wrong. So do tshuva, and it's going to be okay. And a lot of the rabbis in the Talmud seem to believe this too, right? As in this teaching, which is not untypical. Rabbi Levi said, Teshuvah is great, for it reaches to the throne of glory. As it says, in the verse, this is also from the Haftarah for Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Shuvah Yisrael, return, O Israel, unto the Lord your God. Okay? And this wonderful little Devar Torah, which comes from one of the 20th century Hasidic rabbis, the Teshuvah of Israel. So first of all, the verse seems to say, return to the Lord, right? And it's like literally to where God lives. That's Rabbi Levi's point. Teshuvah goes all the way to the throne of glory, right? And here's the word from the Hasidic Rebbe, Rabbi Zaks. The Teshuvah of Israel is great, for, as it were, it awakens Teshuvah above, like all awakening from below, which awakens awakening from above. In other words, this is the basic lesson of Jewish mysticism, right? Whatever happens down here has an effect in the upper world, and vice versa. So for a Hasidic Rebbe to say this, it's like, Shema Yisrael, right? It's basic Judaism, that tshuva below brings about an awakening above. If we return to God, God returns to us. It's just as simple as that. Okay? Comments or questions up to here? Okay, well, let's look at the next text. Right? Now, here's a very different take. And this is about, why does God need to repent? Because if there's a teshuvah above, parallel to our teshuvah down here, well, why does God need that? What did God do wrong? Right? Now, I could give a different theological answer to that, but I'm going to give you the answer of the Talmud. Rav Chana bar Acha said, it was said in the Beit Midrash, God regrets having created four things. Like I said before, Portrait of God as a Young Artist. He regretted the exile. He regretted the creation of the Kasdim, the people from whom Abraham and his family came, the Ishmaelites, and that may be a statement about the Christians, the early Christians, who were referred to as Edom, or it may be about the, this is, before the time of Islam, but may have been about pagans among the Arabs who were Ishmaelites. I mean, the Ishmael is considered the founder of the Arab nation. So that's three things. And what's the fourth one? The evil impulse, the Yetzer Hara. All right? So that, and the proof text he gives for that is this verse from Micah that says that I have made evil. All right? So is it possible that God actually makes evil? Well, according to Micah, yeah, it's very possible. And so there are things that God regrets.
Isaiah too.
Yeah, Isaiah says something similar too. And a lot of Micah is kind of a reprise of Isaiah. Okay. Other comments, questions? So, if God has done evil, God regrets this, regrets having, caused misfortune of one kind or another. So Rabbi Zach's up above here, he sees this regret as a specific act of remorse, right? And, you got to be sorry for what you did if you're going to do tshuva, right? That everybody says that's one of the basic pieces of repentance. It's not enough to say, yeah, I did it, okay? Because maybe you're not sorry you did it, right? So, okay, if you're sorry, then it can be real tshuva. And so Rabbi Zachs is saying, yeah, God is sorry for what he sees as, something that he created that brought pain or difficulty to people's lives. But God begins the process of tshuva here. Right? God notices when we take responsibility for our behavior, and so God acknowledges his role in when things go wrong. We're willing to do teshuvah. God also is willing to do teshuvah. Now, this idea that God is actually inspired to do teshuvah by us is, it's a very nice maneuver. We probably should, examine it a little bit more. Um, if there's a reason why God should do tshuva, maybe we should look at the sequence of responsibility. Maybe God's responsibility is right at the beginning of the chain, right? After all, as all the philosophers say, God is the cause of causes, right? God is, makes everything happen. God even if we sin, well, God created us with a Yetzer Hara, with an impulse, that makes us desire things that we shouldn't, makes us want to do things wrong in order to get what we want. Right? But, it's also, can be kind of inspiring to think that we are, getting God to do tshuva. Yes, still.
God created the serpent.
Yep.
Which beguiled Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Had God not have created the serpent, there would have been nothing to beguile Eve, and we'd all be in the Garden of Eden.
Well,
serpent's
maybe
the personification of the Yetzer Hara, only it's outside of us instead of inside of us.
That is what some of the rabbis say, that the snake is not really a snake. The snake is the Yetzer Hara. Right? That's one possibility. But here, it might be fair to say that God should do teshuvah before we do, because God created the impulses that we have. God is responsible for his creation. We can complain that God didn't make a better creation, but maybe it's fair that God should kind of step up and acknowledge that he's at the root of the problem. Right? Using the word he loosely. Right? So, we could go back on that and say, well, the person who makes the first step towards tshuva, if there's a conflict between people, the one who reaches out to the other person doesn't have to be the one who started it. Right? Doesn't have to be the one who's responsible for it. Sometimes, in order to get a person who has wronged us to take responsibility for their actions, we have to be willing to take the first step. Right? And, it's not fair that you should have to take the first step, but, let's get over fairness. Right? So, maybe we should do the work to end a conflict that we didn't start. Now that leads us to this next passage from Breshit, which is sort of the prequel to our Torah reading on Rosh Hashanah. And so you want to be thinking about that ahead of time, because after all, we don't have a Torah study class next week. We wouldn't have one that Saturday. So here's the story about Sarai and Hagar. This is before Sarai and Avram get their names changed. Right? When she is having difficulty conceiving a child, she gives Avram Hagar to be her surrogate. Right? And so, in some sense, that child will be considered the child of Sarai. Right? So it works up to a point. Hagar gets pregnant, but that produces other problems. So here's the text. He went into Hagar and she conceived. When she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Then Sarai said to Avram, this is all your fault. I gave my slave girl to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May God judge between you and me. In other words, it's your fault, right? So Avram says, instead of saying to his wife, this was your idea, Avram doesn't say that. He's a good husband, really. He says, you know what, she's yours. So you do to her what you please. And so she treats her harshly, and the girl runs away from her. And an angel of God found her by a spring of water in the wilderness on the road to Shur, wherever, I'm not sure where Shur is. And he said, Hagar, where have you come from? And where are you going? She said, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. He said she was the slave girl of Sarai, so, it's not like he didn't know. Right? The angel of God says to her, return to your mistress and submit to her harsh treatment. And the angel of God also said to her, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude. Right? So again, this is, the family of Yishmael. Right? So, it seems kind of like a harsh response from the angel to Hagar. The angel blesses the child, and the angel says, you're going to have lots and lots of descendants. He doesn't really seem that sensitive to her feelings, right? He says, you're going to go back, and you're going to get more of the same. And she says, great, right? But here's the interesting thing. What he says to her is return. Uses the same word, shuv. Right? Return to your mistress. Right? So it's the language of teshuvah. Right? So when the angel tells her to, swallow her pride and go back home and get some more of the same treatment, right? He's not telling her that she's the one who was wrong or that she was at fault somehow. He says sometimes, to resolve a difficult situation, you can't be too worried about who is right. Right? He's validating her perspective. Going home is going to be tough. It's going to be humiliating to be the one to go submit to Sarai's harsh treatment. Right? And, she's going to have to set aside the fact that whatever harsh treatment she's getting is way out of proportion to what she deserved for kind of lording it over Sarai, that, she got pregnant and Sarai didn't. Right? Sometimes for the greater good, you have to be the bigger person. You gotta humble yourself a little and maybe even submit and suffer a little bit. So this is, sometimes you take the high road, and it means you're going to be apologizing in a way you may not really totally mean. Right? And that can feel uncomfortable and maybe a little bit dishonest, but it may be necessary in order to open the door where a relationship has been cut off, right? And we're going to see in the next text the comments on this. It says this is the way Hagar takes it, that her return and her submission are really for show, but it works. And maybe it was necessary for her to do that. So here's the commentary from the Netziv. Okay? takes the word, where it says to suffer under her hand, which is the literal translation of that verse. It should have said, suffer from her. Sarai treated her harshly. But the language of suffer from her would imply she would want to suffer. She would willingly accept her, her punishment, or, that she should not have spoken to her mistress that way because she belongs to her, right? But to Hagar, the angel said God had actually listened to her suffering. The angel would continue to tell her the child she would bear would be, would be the first of, billions and billions of descendants. So he told her she should pretend like she was being suppressed under Sarai. Sarai would think that Hagar was willingly submitting to her. And in truth, after Hagar gave birth, Sarah did not use her like a slave, but as a handmaiden, as when she said, evict the handmaiden later on. Okay. So that's the teaching from the Netziv. The Netziv says that, her willingness to go back to Sarai and to submit to Sarai, it was really a ruse. But it works, right? And so that changes the relationship a little bit. It doesn't fix it. And of course, 13 years later, there she goes with Ishmael. Right? But it does improve her standing. So this, it can be very difficult to go to someone like this, someone who's wronged you, and submit to them. Right? You become very vulnerable. It's always hard to make the first move. One of the things I was told very on in rabbinical school is that you're going to need a package of thanks and a package of I'm sorry. And once in a while I took a piece out of the package that and I said I was sorry, even though I didn't really feel responsible for something that had happened. But you know what? If it fixed a relationship, it was worth it. And also, it's just generally humbling, which is good for me anyway. So sometimes I accepted a responsibility for something, even if it wasn't totally my fault. Yeah. And that's part of, what teshuva is about in certain relationships, right? Because we all, none of us want to be humiliated. None of us want to be rejected. None of us want to sacrifice our dignity doing things that we shouldn't have to do. But, focus on the outcome. Focus on the reconciliation and the fact that the relationship is going to be better if you do this. Or at least, maybe, you'll understand where the other person is coming from, right? And, you might be right that it's not your responsibility to apologize to someone, but that's not always the most productive way to think about it. It's not your obligation. It's your opportunity. I don't know if you've noticed over the years, Rabbi Strauss uses the word opportunity a lot. There are things that I might describe as a mitzvah, and he will describe it as an opportunity, which is not wrong, right? Because a mitzvah is an opportunity to connect with God. a mitzvah is an opportunity to connect with another human being in a way that makes life better. Right? So, opportunity it is. And we should take advantage of some of those opportunities. You know? So, going back to Rabbi Levi, Teshuvah is great not because it's necessary or because it's an obligation, but because it is powerful. It reaches up to God. It even has an impact on God. It even inspires God, according to Rabbi Sachs. It inspires God to do teshuvah. Right? And so communication sometimes helps bring about a response, which hopefully will be restorative and productive. And we see this kind of dynamic a little bit earlier in Deuteronomy. Right? This is really, I think this is in last week's Sedra. Right? This is kind of a mutuality between God and the Jewish people, where it says here, you have affirmed this day that the Lord is your God, that you will walk in his ways, that you will observe his laws, commandments, and rules, and that you will obey him. And God has affirmed this day that you are, as he promised you, his treasured people, who shall observe all of his commandments. So, and the word affirmed literally, the Hebrew means to cause to say. He'emircha, to cause to say. Mm-hmm. So by declaring my allegiance to God, I compel God to declare God's allegiance to me. Right? So here also, the awakening comes from below, and it has an effect on high. Right? We declare our fidelity to God. God responds and declares that he treasures us. Right? We make the first move. We're the ones who say, we are God's people. And then in return, God adopts us as God's own, which doesn't really change the beauty and the great quality of this mutuality in the image, the actual relationship. So hopefully you have, as Jewish people should have, and cultivate that kind of relationship with God. Okay? Share with you one more text here. Okay? Any questions or comments up to here? Okay, so just this last piece, and this is from another 19th century commentator, the Malbim. So the words return to is vishav ta'ad, which literally means turn around toward. And similarly, phrase in verse 10, tashuv el, it means return to. And this variation in language reflects two stages in the process of repentance. Right? The first stage is when we realize that we did wrong and we have to change our direction. That is turning toward God. Right? That's vishav ta'ad. The second stage is coming into the presence of God as the result of one's new way of being, returning to God, tashuv el. So I think that's a nice insight that, every time we do teshuvah and we turn towards God, that has other consequences that because we are different people after that. We are more capable of truly returning to God, of coming into God's presence. The more tshuva you do, the closer you can be to God. That seems to be the lesson of the Malbim. Comments or questions here? All right, then. I have covered everything I planned for tonight.
I have a
So-
different question.
Please.
How do we go to services tomorrow night?
Well, there will not be a live stream of the chapel service this Shabbat. And I don't mean the chapel service. I mean the member-led service. There will not be a live stream of that. There will be a live stream of the sanctuary service and that bar mitzvah. There will be a sanctuary of the service in Friedman Levitt where there's a bat mitzvah going on.
Wait. Is there going to be a slicha service? How do we get to
Oh,
hear
you're talking
that?
about Saturday night. Yes.
Saturday night?
And that will be live streamed.
But where do we go to attend it?
Ashley, would you like to weigh in on that?
So that'll actually be broadcasted on social media. So you'll be able to find that on Facebook and YouTube, and it will be on our homepage.
Oh my God.
So if you just go to bethyeshurun.org, you can pick it up there.
Wait a minute. bethyeshurun.org. Yeah, but that just leads to stream, and I know how to do
Right.
that. But you're talking about something else.
No, it will be streamed.
It
Right,
will be
Ashley?
streamed?
Yes.
The Slichot
So do I
service
go?
will be
So which
streamed.
sanctuary do I go to? Barg or the other one?
It'll be in Barg, I'm pretty sure.
It will be.
I read or heard somewhere that it's going to be a whole bunch of sermons from rabbis all over the United States.
So it's the Slichot Night Live. That's a program with the USCJ and the RA, and that registration closes tonight. So if you're interested in doing that, even if you're not sure if you're going to attend it for sure, I would register tonight because
How?
it's all via Zoom. And that is on our website. I'm looking while I'm talking.
Is it on the stream website?
No, we will not be streaming that because that's a program that we are only a participant in. We're not presenting it.
Yeah, so I believe that's going to be by Zoom.
Correct.
But when?
Well, it's all evening. I think it starts at 8
what-
o'clock or so,
8 p.m. what day?
a Saturday
Friday.
night. And there'll be programs running until 2 in the morning. I
So,
recommend
Ann-
you take a break for the service.
Right. I'm going to put a copy of the link to register in the chat box.
Oh, okay.
Dale, you had a
I'm looking for
question.
it.
Yes, I spoke to the AV guy yesterday evening, and he said that Friday, that is tomorrow, he was going to set AV stuff up in Righteous Hall.
Yeah,
That's not for, that's probably setting up for Museum Minion for High Holy Days because we do not have the capacity to stream more than 2 things at the same time.
Then on High Holiday, how are we going to do the Barg, the chapel, and the Museum Minion?
we're going to be in Friedman Levitt.
Friedman Levitt?
Yes.
The Museum Minion
I'm
is,
just counting 3 things.
right, the Museum Minion is going to be on Zoom, and they are sending out the Zoom link to their participants, and then it will be streamed through Zoom, I believe, to their Facebook. All of those details aren't completely worked out, but on our website, we will be streaming the Barg Sanctuary and Friedman Levitt, where the chapel community will be.
Well, the AV guy said he was going to set it up tomorrow sometime.
But that's not for us.
But let me finish.
Yeah.
And then he was planning on setting it up again for High Holiday because he was going to have to take it down in the meantime because of the school.
He may be setting up microphones and things of that nature, but not to stream.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Ashley, are you going to have some responsibility maintaining things on Rosh Hashanah?
I am on an hour prior to services beginning, and I am on until services end for every single service.
So you're basically doing Rosh Hashanah on Thursday.
Yes, all of it.
Yeah, well, I wish you a good Yontif. At least you're off next Thursday night, since we are not having class next week. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
What do I do to see the chat?
So at the very
Click
bottom
on
of,
chat down at the bottom.
Mhm.
So, Bob, Aurora, here's the thing about Museum Minyan. They're not doing a live stream on Yontif. They're doing a Zoom like they normally do on Shabbat morning. Okay, other questions? I probably should have taken questions about Yontif like at the beginning. You know? This is what everybody really wants to know. How are we going to do this holiday? But we
Right.
will. We will.
And you do
Oh.
not have to log in to view services. So if you have not logged in to your member account, as much as we encourage it, we've not made it an obstacle for those that may have difficulties with that.
Yeah. And Bob is muted, but he says he's going to call you in a few minutes.
Oh,
Okay? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. And I'm sure I will see you before, but Shana Tova Matuka, good and sweet New Year.
yes, and to you also.
And thank you again, Ashley.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you,
Shabbat
Rabbi.
Shalom.
Shabbat
Thank you,
Shalom
Paul.
and Shana Tova.
Shana Tova, everybody.